October 10, 2025, began like any other day, but there was an unusual energy in the air that no one could ignore. For months, whispers had circulated online, in financial forums, and among seasoned investors. The long, anticipated revaluation of the Iraqi Dinar and the Vietnamese Dong might finally happen. At first, it seemed like another rumor, just another hopeful headline promising untold wealth to anyone who had held on to these currencies. But as dawn broke over Baghdad and Hanoi, there were signs that this time it might be real. Notifications started pinging across phones, emails from banks and financial platforms arrived, and news tickers flashed cryptic messages hinting at confirmations. Those who had been waiting for years felt a sudden rush of adrenaline. It was a strange mixture of disbelief and excitement, like standing on the edge of something monumental, but not knowing exactly how it would unfold. In homes around Iraq, people quietly checked their accounts in the early hours, refreshing online banking apps again and again, hoping for that magical moment when numbers would change. Children, oblivious to the financial stakes, played in the background while parents whispered to each other, debating whether to take out money immediately or wait for official statements. The streets, still quiet, held an unusual tension, a sense of anticipation that hung over everything. Cafes opened earlier than usual, with patrons discussing what they had read online, their voices filled with a mix of hope and skepticism. For those who had invested even modestly in Iraqi Dinar or Vietnamese Dong, this day represented more than just potential profit. It symbolized years of patience, of holding on when friends and relatives scoffed, of weathering doubt and rumors with steadfast resolve. By mid-morning, social media became a storm. Hashtags related to the dinar and dong revaluation started trending globally. Videos of people checking their accounts, screaming in disbelief, or calling loved ones to share the news began circulating faster than anyone could follow. "It's happening," one caption read alongside screenshots showing sudden increases in currency values. Financial analysts and economists who had once dismissed the idea were now on camera, explaining cautiously that this could change everything from local economies to international investments. The chatter was relentless, a constant hum of excitement and anxiety. Investors who had been quietly holding on in hope now found themselves swept up in a tidal wave of shared emotion, a collective gasp of optimism that transcended borders. In Hanoi, the scene was strikingly similar. Residents of the city, long accustomed to the Vietnamese Dong's low valuation, watched the unfolding events with equal parts excitement and trepidation. Small business owners gathered around televisions and smartphones, recalculating budgets and considering expansion plans that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. Parents whispered to their children about what the new opportunities might bring, carefully tempering the excitement with lessons about patience and responsibility. Local media outlets broadcast live feeds from the central bank, where officials hinted at upcoming announcements without revealing exact figures, keeping viewers on the edge of their seats. Every increment of speculation sent ripples through communities, as people imagined what a stronger currency could mean for imports, exports, and everyday life. Back online, forums and groups exploded with activity. Long threads dissected every piece of news, shared personal stories, and speculated on the immediate effects on global markets. People who had never considered themselves investors suddenly found themselves calculating returns, comparing exchange rates, and planning their next steps. The conversation wasn't just about money, it was about opportunity, about the promise of a day when patience might finally pay off. Some shared tips, others cautioned restraint, but every post carried the same underlying pulse of excitement. The world seemed to be holding its breath collectively, waiting for the first definitive signs of the revaluation to take shape. By afternoon, the first official statements began to trickle in. Banks released brief notices confirming that the central banks in Iraq and Vietnam had implemented the long-awaited changes. Screens lit up with numbers that seemed almost surreal to those who had been tracking them for years. People who had doubted, who had questioned the rumors, now found themselves staring at figures that validated their hopes. The initial shock was followed by waves of jubilation. both online and offline. Families celebrated quietly at home, friends shared ecstatic messages, and complete strangers connected over shared excitement in cafes, public squares, and even on the streets. The emotional intensity was almost palpable, a mixture of relief, triumph, and anticipation for what the coming days would bring. Even the financial world, typically cool and calculated, was swept up in the fervor. Analysts worked overtime to interpret the changes, media outlets scrambled to update stories, and investors reevaluated strategies in real time. The revaluation wasn't just an isolated event. It was sending shockwaves through global markets. Stock indices reacted, Forex platforms saw unprecedented activity, and speculative trading reached a fever pitch. The sheer scale of engagement was unlike anything most had ever experienced, a reminder that behind every number on a balance sheet are people, dreams, and stories of patience and resilience. As night fell over Baghdad and Hanoi, streets and homes alike remained abuzz with conversation. Messages continued to flood phones, social media feeds refused to stop, and news channels provided near-constant updates. For those who had been waiting for this moment for years, October 10, 2025 was more than a date on a calendar. It was the culmination of a journey, the day when speculation turned into reality, and the promise of financial transformation felt tangible. Even amid the excitement, there was a quiet understanding that this was just the beginning, that the world would be watching closely to see how the revaluation would unfold over the coming days. Weeks and months, in living rooms and cafes, offices and banks, people celebrated, planned, and speculated. The energy of hope was infectious, and for a brief, electrifying moment, it felt as if the entire world had paused to witness the same astonishing event. October 10, 2025 would be remembered not just for the numbers on the screen, but for the collective heartbeat of millions who dared to hope that a long-held dream was finally coming true. As the official announcements of the Iraqi Dinar and Vietnamese Dong revaluation spread through the airwaves and online platforms, the impact was immediate and electric. Global markets, usually steady and predictable in their rhythms, erupted with activity unlike anything seen in recent memory. Traders on the floors of stock exchanges in New York, London, and Tokyo suddenly found themselves in a whirlwind of calculations, predictions, and rapid decisions. Screens flashed with unprecedented spikes in currency values, brokerage platforms reported surges in trading volume, and financial news anchors struggled to keep up with the breaking developments. For many, it was a surreal spectacle, numbers shifting almost by the second, fortunes appearing and disappearing in minutes, a dramatic reminder of just how interconnected the world's economies had become. In Iraq, the streets mirrored the chaos and excitement of the financial world. People poured out of their homes and workplaces, crowding around television screens in public squares, bank lobbies, and small shops. Families huddled together, phones in hand, confirming the revaluation with trembling fingers. There was laughter, there were tears, and there were long, stunned silences as the reality settled in. The value of their currency had changed overnight in a way that could transform lives. Small business owners calculated the potential boost to their purchasing power, imagining expansions that had previously seemed impossible. Shopkeepers smiled at customers in ways that conveyed hope beyond mere words, and neighbors embraced in spontaneous celebrations, sharing the joy that came from finally seeing years of patience validated. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, the mood was equally electric. Citizens of Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, and countless smaller towns flocked to banks, currency exchange offices, and public screens to witness the historic moment. Street vendors paused in the middle of their daily routines, eyes glued to smartphones displaying the latest numbers. Conversations turned to planning: who would invest in property, who would expand their businesses, and who could finally pursue long, delayed dreams. Cafes filled with patrons exchanging excited chatter about the day's events, while elders offered cautious optimism, reminding younger generations to be prudent despite the excitement. The revaluation was more than financial. It was a social event, a national phenomenon that bridged age, class, and profession, uniting communities in a shared experience of exhilaration. Global investors also felt the impact immediately. Hedge funds and investment firms that had long monitored the Iraqi Dinar and Vietnamese Dong scrambled to respond. Analysts and strategists conducted rapid reassessments of portfolios, weighing the implications of sudden currency strength against other assets. Speculators attempted to predict the trajectory of the markets in the hours, days, and weeks ahead. Online trading platforms experienced unprecedented traffic, some slowing under the sheer volume of transactions. Individuals who had previously only dabbled in Forex trading now found themselves thrust into the heart of a global financial event. Social media exploded with real-time reactions, screenshots, and advice, creating a sense of worldwide connectivity that emphasized just how impactful these two revaluations truly were. Back on the streets of Baghdad, the energy continued to build. Crowds gathered outside banks that were now processing record numbers of withdrawals and exchanges. Long lines formed, but no one complained patience had been part of the journey, and the anticipation only made the moment sweeter. Families huddled together, counting, comparing, and recalculating their holdings as the official numbers rolled in. For many, this was the first tangible evidence of financial empowerment, the realization that their long-term patience had finally been rewarded. Children watched their parents with wide-eyed wonder, sensing the excitement in the air even if they didn't fully understand the financial details. The city itself seemed alive in a way it rarely was, with streets echoing laughter, shouts of joy, and the sound of car horns celebrating the moment. In Vietnam, the scenes were equally vivid. Public spaces, usually busy but orderly, became arenas of spontaneous celebration. Residents gathered around television sets in parks and on sidewalks, sharing the moment with neighbors and strangers alike. Stories emerged of people who had quietly held on to small amounts of currency, now discovering that their modest investments had multiplied in value. Business owners began drafting new plans for expansion, calculating how the stronger dong could help them import goods more efficiently or invest in growth. The emotional intensity was palpable. Pride, excitement, and relief combined to create a collective sense of triumph, a shared acknowledgement that the long wait was over. As the day progressed, media coverage became relentless. News outlets around the world provided minute-by-minute updates, broadcasting scenes from Baghdad and Hanoi alongside expert commentary on global market reactions. Analysts debated the potential impact on trade, investments, and the broader economic landscape. Social media amplified every detail, from live streams of cheering crowds to screenshots of skyrocketing account balances. Influencers and content creators jumped in, sharing reactions, offering analysis, and connecting with audiences who had been waiting for this historic day. The revaluation had evolved from a financial event into a cultural phenomenon, a story of hope, patience, and possibility that resonated with people on every continent. Even as the celebrations continued, the magnitude of what had happened began to sink in. Governments and financial institutions around the world scrambled to assess the implications. Currency reserves were recalculated, exchange rates adjusted, and trade agreements reconsidered. Investors and citizens alike realized that this was not a fleeting moment, but the beginning of a new chapter in global finance. The sudden surge in value of the Iraqi dinar and Vietnamese dong had ripple effects that could influence international markets, foreign investments, and the economic futures of millions. In private homes, people reflected on their journeys to this day. For many, it had been years of hope, patience, and quiet faith in the eventual revaluation. Some had faced skepticism from friends and family. Others had endured financial uncertainty, yet all had persevered. Now, in the wake of confirmation, those years of endurance felt validated, their commitment rewarded. Conversations turned from speculation to planning, from dreaming to action. Individuals considered how they might use newfound opportunities to improve lives, invest in education, start businesses, or help their communities. The excitement of financial gain was intertwined with the joy of empowerment, a reminder that money could create possibilities far beyond personal wealth. As night fell over the cities of Iraq and Vietnam, the celebration showed no signs of slowing. Families and friends gathered together, toasting to a day that would be remembered forever. In homes, businesses, and public squares, laughter and cheer echoed late into the evening. The revaluation had transcended the financial realm to become a shared human experience, a story of hope realized on a global stage. And while analysts, investors, and governments worked to navigate the complex aftermath, the people on the streets simply celebrated, a living testament to what patience, persistence, and the power of possibility could achieve. October 10, 2025 would not be remembered merely as a date of financial significance. It would be remembered as a day when the world paused, watched, and collectively celebrated a historic moment, when the value of two currencies ignited hope and excitement that spanned continents, cultures, and generations. The streets of Baghdad and Hanoi would long echo with the memories of cheers, laughter, and the shared thrill of a day that had finally brought dreams to life. If you want, I can now expand scene 3 to 1,000 words focusing on the global reaction, viral social media moments, and long-term speculation after the revaluation. Do you want me to do that? Here's an expanded version of scene 3 to around 1,000 words, fully immersive and narrative-driven. As the news of the Iraqi Dinar and Vietnamese Dong revaluation rippled across the globe, it became clear that this was no ordinary financial event. By mid-morning, the initial shock and excitement had evolved into something much larger, a worldwide phenomenon capturing the attention of ordinary citizens, investors, and governments alike. Social media feeds were flooded with live reactions, viral videos, and threads dissecting every possible implication of the revaluation. People who had previously ignored Forex news suddenly found themselves drawn into discussions about currency values, exchange rates, and investment opportunities. The world had become a virtual gathering place for millions, all witnessing and reacting to the same unprecedented moment in real time. Influencers, content creators, and analysts seized the moment. Live streams showed jubilant crowds in Baghdad and Hanoi, waving flags, hugging strangers, and celebrating the newfound value of their currencies. Every video, every post seemed to amplify the excitement, sparking further reactions in countries far removed from Iraq and Vietnam. Viewers in Europe, the Americas, and Asia shared screenshots of skyrocketing account balances, personal testimonies, and speculations about how this would affect global markets. The internet became a living organism, pulsing with excitement and speculation. Twitter threads, TikTok videos, and YouTube live streams turned into hubs of collective fascination, where people could witness history while commenting, sharing, and reacting in real time. In Iraq, the atmosphere was electric. Streets overflowed with people celebrating not just financial gain, but the sense of possibility that had finally become tangible. Families checked their holdings, neighbors exchanged advice and congratulations, and small businesses began drafting plans for expansion, investments, and improvements that had once seemed impossible. Even casual conversations between strangers carried a note of excitement. Discussions of school fees, home renovations, or future travel plans suddenly seemed feasible in a way they hadn't before. The revaluation had transformed daily life into a series of opportunities, and people savored the feeling that their perseverance had finally borne fruit. In Vietnam, the reaction was equally extraordinary. Citizens crowded public squares, cafes, and markets, their attention split between smartphones and public screens displaying real-time updates. Street vendors paused from selling goods to watch the news unfold, sharing their astonishment and joy with customers. For many, the revaluation of the dong was not just about wealth. It was about national pride, progress, and the tangible improvement of quality of life. Families envisioned better futures for their children. Business owners calculated expansion plans, and everyday citizens felt empowered by the sudden strength of their currency. Conversations across towns and cities revolved around planning, hope, and cautious optimism, as people imagined the ways this historic change could transform their lives. Globally, investors scrambled to respond. Hedge funds and financial institutions analyzed the sudden shifts in currency values, attempting to predict short-term movements while considering long-term impacts. Traders executed split-second decisions to capitalize on the volatility, while analysts provided live commentary explaining potential consequences for emerging markets, trade balances, and international investments. Even those who had previously dismissed the dinar and dong as insignificant suddenly had to reconsider, reevaluating portfolios and recalculating strategies. The financial world, usually methodical and cautious, had been thrown into a whirlwind of urgency, excitement, and rapid adaptation. Media coverage intensified as the day progressed. News networks broadcast live from Baghdad and Hanoi, capturing jubilant crowds, personal stories, and expert commentary. Interviews with ordinary citizens revealed the human side of this historic moment. A young couple planning their first home purchase, a retired teacher realizing that her savings had dramatically increased in value, a small business owner calculating how a stronger currency could allow for expansion. Each story added depth to the event, showing that the revaluation was not just a financial headline, but a transformative experience touching millions of lives. On social media, the excitement was amplified by viral content. Clips of cheering crowds, celebrations outside banks, and individuals discovering the increased value of their holdings were shared tens of thousands of times within hours. Hashtags related to the Iraqi Dinar, Vietnamese Dong, and October 10, 2025 trended globally, connecting people across continents in a shared experience. Users commented on one another's posts, shared advice, and speculated about the future. The moment transcended borders, languages, and cultures, creating a sense of global participation in a historic event. People who had never considered themselves investors suddenly felt part of a worldwide financial movement, contributing to a collective story that spanned time zones and continents. Even governments and international institutions responded quickly. Central banks monitored the effects, recalculated currency reserves, and adjusted policies to accommodate the sudden shifts. Trade and economic analysts debated the ripple effects on imports, exports, and global financial stability. Meetings convened in capitals around the world as officials tried to understand how this revaluation would reshape economic dynamics. While much of the global population celebrated, institutions worked behind the scenes to navigate the complex realities of a rapidly changing financial landscape. In homes and offices worldwide, people reflected on the implications for their personal lives. Some planned investments in property, education, or business expansions. Others considered travel, healthcare, or debt repayment strategies now made possible by the newfound value of their currencies. The excitement was not merely about immediate financial gain. It was about opportunity, empowerment, and the ability to shape the future in ways that had previously seemed unattainable. Conversations shifted from speculation to planning, from dreaming to action, as individuals and families began charting their paths forward in this transformed economic environment. As night fell, the celebrations in Baghdad and Hanoi showed no signs of slowing. Streets were filled with music, laughter, and the sounds of spontaneous festivities. Families gathered in homes, exchanging congratulations and sharing stories of the day. Young people danced in public squares, waving national flags, while older generations reflected quietly on the significance of what had occurred. The revaluation had become a cultural event as much as a financial one, a shared human experience connecting people to each other and to the possibilities of the future. The global impact continued to unfold. Investors and governments assessed long-term implications. Social media buzzed with analysis and speculation, and ordinary citizens adjusted their lives to reflect newfound opportunities. Analysts cautioned patience, reminding people that financial markets could still fluctuate, but the emotional impact of the day was undeniable. October 10, 2025 had become a symbol of hope, persistence, and the power of possibility. a moment when patience and belief were rewarded in a way that touched millions across the world. By the end of the day, October 10 had achieved a rare feat. It became both a historic financial milestone and a shared cultural celebration. From the streets of Baghdad and Hanoi to homes across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, the world had collectively experienced something extraordinary. The revaluation of the Iraqi Dinar and Vietnamese Dong had transformed lives, inspired dreams, and created a story that would be remembered and retold for years to come. It was more than a financial event. It was a global moment of celebration, hope, and possibility, a testament to the power of patience, resilience, and the enduring human capacity to dream.